understand my expectation was that we were just trying to understand our vision or our idea about what we were expecting gardens to look like within the context of One Hive. And Boring uploaded that to a forum post. I don't know if any of you have seen it.
No, I wasn't able.
I saw the beginning.
That's fair.
Yesterday, I'm sorry. Yesterday I was a big deal because I had something. For some reason, I was KO yesterday, and today I could see the beginning of it. So I kind of got better the idea. But I would like to listen today, and also I have some questions.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we will have the chance. Paulo.
Hey, Paulo.
Hello.
Well, with 7 of us here, maybe we shouldn't necessarily wait for Luke, and I'm sure he'll drop in when he does, and we can have like a little intro where everyone gets to talk and feels good. That's how we play. So maybe we can just do a quick intentions and distractions. I can model. It's like intentions for the call and distractions for the call. So my intention is I really want to make a decision and move forward with the garden swarm versus common swarm kind of thing, and really like understand what was said in the call yesterday, and like the reasoning and how we move forward from a marketing perspective and from a development perspective, and make sure that we can just get this done with so we can get back to deving, and like actually like get economies out for people to use. That's my intention for the call. Topics I want to cover is like coordination between teams and marketing. Those are my main 2 topics, but I'm very open to hear also the vision, the garden's vision restated. And with that, I'll pass it to Chewy.
Thank you, Grip. Intentions. Well, yeah, I'd like to have like a clearer vision of what is gonna go on, what is gonna happen with the garden swarm, and regardless of the decision that is made today, get the most out of everything, since I truly believe in the growth of the projects, regardless of the split. So it's just I thought organizing everything and see how we can get it out there in the best way possible, and no distractions for two. Oh, sorry, I passed it to Will.
Me. I think I'm hoping to clarify whether we're going to consider the term gardens as a blanket term for many different types of kind of DAO-like organizations, or if we're going to use it for something more specific, in which case it would also be good to determine whether basically the One Hive specific version or the common specific version will be ultimately referred to as gardens. And yeah, I'm just generally interested to hear opinions about how what people think about boxing them all together or splitting them up, basically. That's me. I'll pass it on to Boring.
For me, I generally want to know how to map Guardians in a way that I can understand it, because I still have trouble to understand what actually Guardian is, because it seems there's some more than definition to the Guardians. Also, it seems like there's side projects that TEC work in. I just want to know, is it included in the Guardians? And I hope get more understanding. It's still a bit not clear for me. And yeah, I'll just pass it to Bitcoiner.
Thank you, Boring. Yeah, well, I don't know. I started to get into this whole world of the gardens last Monday, so I don't know much. I have the same questions than Boring. I don't know anything, to be honest. Well, I understand this is about creating some template for other communities to create their own DAO. This I have understood. I think I don't know exactly the tech project, how it's interconnected with gardens, and I don't know exactly how I can help the most. But yeah, I will try to help where I can. Yeah, so that's it for me. I pass it to Pablo.
Hi everyone. My intentions for this meeting is basically hearing everyone's opinion about this topic and see what kind of decision is made about it. And distractions, none. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll pass it to Sam.
Hello. Well, intentions for this meeting. I would like to. I think that the topic on gardens is important. I also would like to understand how we can collaborate better between the groups that have been working on conviction voting, because I think that it's not only the on what gardens is or which is going to be the roadmap for gardens. It's more like try to connect better, because I think that we took a very close position at the beginning of the project because we were organizing ourselves, and it had some consequences, and I guess that it's time to revert the situation and see where we can reconnect again. And also I have a lot of questions regarding the vision of you, Luke, and Will, regarding the communities of One Hive and how we can help from the people who has been working on TEC, on the Commons or Gardens template. And I think that there are things that will be used, but I would like to understand first better. So I will pass it to Luke, and then I will do the questions. Distraction for this call. It's a little bit windy. This kind of this is not something that I like. I think that how to say that this kind of discussions regarding. I think that they are important, but at the same time, I think that I want everyone to be okay and to be aligned, and at the same time, I didn't want to say that this is a distraction, but what I want to say is that this kind of disturbs me a little bit. That's the way I will put it. That sorry when I am not responding all the time, because it is this kind of things that disturbs me internally, and yeah, this is how sometimes I feel. But as I said, it is very important for me to align our perspectives and our way to work on these things. So I am up for it, and I will pass it to Luke.
Hey, my intentions for the call are to kind of just discuss what's going on in TEC and Gardens, the Gardens template, the Gardens idea for DAO Factory on onehive.org, and just try and get some clarity on where people are and what people want to do. So hopefully we can resolve the confusion around Gardens. As far as distractions, I just woke up literally out of bed, so I'm a little groggy. But I think I will manage. I'm not sure. I came a little bit late. I'm not sure who has not gone or if I'm last. But if I'm last, then I'll hand it off to whoever was starting the.
Sure, I'll jump in as facilitator and just make this thing move. So I think the most important thing to start off on is the vision for Gardens. And I don't know, Luke or Will, if you guys, which one of you wants to lead that? Maybe like a 4 or 5 minute discussion, and also hopefully including some of the challenges that we have with the version that the Commons template, how that causes issues.
Cool. Yeah, I can take that really quick. So we started working on Gardens, and this is before XDI or anything like that. I think I shared the original doc that I wrote up talking about the idea in the forum thread. I know you're on it. I went back and looked. I saw a comment from you, Griff, and you're like, "Why don't we just call this a Commons?" It was pretty funny given the situation where we're at right now. But the interesting thing was that there's a bunch of elements of that have sort of evolved in different directions from there. But the core idea, in my opinion, was we wanted to have a kind of prescriptive way for people to do to launch communities and launch DAOs that was a lot more prescriptive. It followed a specific template so that we could have a limited set of workflows, kind of pushing back against all of the customizability and flexibility of Aragon, and say, this is how we think the workflow for this organization should be, and we'll create a UI that caters to that, and you can go in and you can create an organization with a few clicks of a button, and it'll work a kind of very specific way, kind of like how we see Colony or Moloch or DevStack work, where there's one kind of workflow that you use, and everybody is using that pattern. And in that initial ideation, we kind of intended to use what we called the Gardens template at the time, with a bonding curve and conviction voting, and we talked about the benefits of that, and we referenced the common stack, and it was great. But the challenge of using the bonding curve template, as we've kind of seen even with the TEC launch, but also when we were thinking about moving Honey over to XDI and just in general, launching a DAO with a bonding curve is a much more arduous process. You have this pre-sale hatch, whatever you want to call it, kind of dependency that we haven't quite figured out how to make super easy and smooth, and maybe it shouldn't ever be easy and smooth. Maybe it should be an arduous process in terms of creating a successful organization with that template. It introduces legal questions around what things need to be, and I know with the TEC, that's a lot of work is being done to have people join an association, that sort of thing, which I think is really useful work that needs to be done to use that template, right? But it's also not as easy to go in and be okay, we're just going to follow a template. We're going to issue a token, kind of somebody would create a subreddit or something like that on a platform. They go in, they create the thing, it's connected, it works a certain way, they can add people in. And so I think what has kind of been the roadmap for the team that has been working on Celeste and the onehive.org interface primarily was we've got this interface we've been iterating on and testing for Honey and OneHive. We're going to integrate Celeste and disputable voting because we thought that having that way to encode the intent was kind of the really important piece for If this is like a community or subreddit and you're not necessarily trusting the founder, you want to be able to say, this is what I bought into, this is the rules of the community. And so we've been working on that piece. But in terms of making other communities able to use the platform, able to create a DAO, we kind of see the next iteration, like if you're doing agile project management, then the next kind of improvement there on the roadmap would be, let's take what we've done with the like onehive.org interface with the disputable apps and with conviction voting and make it really easy for that to be a factory. So you can just bring a token or create a token. And that solves most of the like the kind of vision to have people create these DAOs that follow a pattern, the pattern that we're kind of dogfooding already with OneHive, and do that with the least amount of friction or overhead or like custom workflows possible. And I think the challenge here is we've got these two sort of divergent goals in terms of productionizing the like Gardens template or Commons template with the TEC that has this whole hatch phase. It has this like legal requirements. It has these like steps that are very different like than the workflow that you would need for just using conviction voting. And so if we were to try and implement that or integrate that into the interface, then we'd have a whole bunch of workflows and user flows that wouldn't be necessary for the two other like for the actual like conviction voting part of launching the DAO. And so we'd create a bunch of like custom work that you guys are sort of already doing to do the TEC thing, but it wouldn't follow the same pattern as the other organizations on there. So now we get this into this sort of modular discussion of like flexibility and features on that interface that gets really, really hard to manage. I know personally, having worked on Aragon, that was a really, really painful experience of not being able to iterate quickly or move quickly because the scope was so broad and ambitious and modular. Okay, so I feel like I'm rambling now, but that's sort of both the vision and I think where some of the tension might be coming from with regard to this idea that these should be two separate things. If that's helpful.
Extremely. Oh man, my mic was on. You guys are hearing me typing the whole time. I'm taking great notes. That's what you can hear. Will, maybe you have some things to add?
In terms of like the general garden structure, my interpretation was always just we would like to basically generalize the OneHive sort of protocol effectively to make it easy for other people to deploy, use our issuance process for new tokens, and allow people to convert current tokens. Besides that, I mean, it's all pretty much the same as what Luke has just said. Yeah, and I suppose my interpretation, just ultimately after looking through all of the TEC stuff that was going on and it's being built, which is great stuff. I kind of it just kind of occurred to me that it's very different to what we were intending on building, and ultimately I think it would be useful to characterize them as different, I suppose. But yeah, that's. Yeah.
Nice. So at least what I got from this was that Garden's vision is like legendary. It's been in the works and it's been evolving for almost 2 years. Part of the problem is that giving users too many choices means you have less users, right? Like, makes it too complicated for people to use. And the bonding curve was cut out because it caused a lot of these extra legal issues and more complications in design. And now that Celeste is being moved forward, there's the next step is really like starting to get more users to use ideally the OneHive model. And in some ways, the Commons model with the bonding curve sort of confuses things. Like, it makes it not as clear for people to just like, oh yeah, here's the easy solution, right? And this large modular scope makes us move slower. So that's a justifiable fear. Does that sound like a good overview?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable to me. And also, I mean, maybe Luke wants to say something, but I'd also like to ask you what your like vision of like the garden swarm kind of is as well. I'm curious what your what like the ultimate sort of goal is of all of the templates that you're working on now. I don't know if Luke wanted to say something.
I have a question, and I can also play part of the right now we are focused on launching seeds. It should be already launched. We have had some delays. This is why we have not been replying so much to the rest of the thing that OneHive were asking from us, because there are two things. One is that we are building all these different applications connected with each other. It may seem a little bit more difficult, as you were saying. The other thing is that we have been coordinating with people from OneHive in that Garden Swarm. Mostly of them are comes from OneHive. Well, it has been a task of getting engaged inside the code, and it was also something that that was that is the current roadmap that we hope to finish very soon. To have a group that is capable of doing these kind of things and doing it for TSC. And later on, the idea is to expand the template to the rest, so we can also help in the vision you have for OneHive and other things. What I specifically wanted to do is to redesign conviction voting to make it more easy to understand, and do some explorations with Fiore on the design, and try to make that easier to for people. What else? I have some specific questions regarding your vision on Garden Swarm, on Gardens template, because I didn't get it entirely. The idea is that you create a new token for each community, and then what will be the funding token? Because I think that the idea at the beginning was to have each community has its governance token, and then the funding is made by Honey. So we have a double communities that has two tokens, right? And how would be the interaction with these two tokens? Because I think that what we have right now with the Honey template is that we have Honey and Honey. In order to make a subcommunity, we need another token and Honey, or the same Honey for the two things, but then there is no relation with Honey. And in that case, which will be the mechanism? The abounding curve, or a broker token that how people put money there? I mean, how people put Honey there? This is the part that I don't understand.
Yeah, so I mean, originally the intention was to kind of have all these communities be sort of like sub-communities of OneHive, and use Honey as their like collateral token in the bonding curve, and use Honey for proposals. And the thinking here was this would sort of connect everything together so that it would be sort of like one bigger community. And I think because people get confused around the bonding curve, and they may not like want to use Honey as their reserve currency, that feels like kind of a relatively it's a hard sell for people, and I think that like it's maybe not even the best choice in general in terms of like um, both the technical side and the like practical side to like impose that restriction. I think that would be pretty limiting to like maybe only a certain type of communities that are really tightly affiliated. And like I think it would be a shame if we kind of forced people into that model. Like I really want to see lots of people using conviction voting and taking advantage of this thing. And so like you got to listen to what people sort of want to a certain degree in order to like to do things. So I think rather than doing that, like force them to use honey, it's much easier and a lot simpler, I think, to do kind of what we did with honey and say you've got this issuance model, it's sustainable, it like mints tokens, you'll always have tokens to like mint to your community, and so like the system's just really easy. It's really hard to go wrong. Like even if it does go wrong, it'll sort of self-correct over time. Or like if you want to bring an existing ERC20 token, which is really common, like people that have DeFi projects or they have other communities and they already have a token, they're just like, we want to use conviction voting for our community. But it's a huge barrier if they're like, oh, we need a new token. So those two kind of user stories, I think, are really important. Like, I have a token, I want to use your product, or I don't have a token, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to use your product. If we can solve for those two things, I think we're covered pretty well. And the question of like, how do we relate this to honey? How do we like make this sustainable for one hive or connect it into the ecosystem in some way? It's sort of a separate like implementation detail, and I think there's lots of options for that. So like one of the ways, well, at a baseline, we've got disputable conviction voting and disputable voting as sort of a core piece of how this thing works, and that's using honey. So that's like one way. The other way is if you have these tokens being generated or being brought over from Ethereum onto XDAI to be used with conviction voting, they'll probably naturally end up on HoneySwap because that's the natural place to swap, and that's good for us as well. But if we wanted to kind of have like a little bit more of a direct association when somebody comes and launches a DAO or a token, we can say there's a charge to like set up an organization and make sure you're serious. It's like $100 in honey. And we don't even take it. We just use that to bootstrap the liquidity pool on HoneySwap for your token, and we burn it so that there's like this connection. And you take some of your existing supply, and we pair it with the honey that you provide, and that creates that sort of relationship. It's not like a crowd sale. It's just sort of like that's part of like setting up the org. We need you to have some liquidity because we've got some hooks that allow you to exchange tokens. So it's like it feels reasonable. It doesn't feel like extractive, but it like connects the communities into one hive in a reasonable way. That's pretty direct. If somebody's bringing their own token, we can do something similar. We wouldn't be able to like mint their token to like say this is a certain percentage of your supply to establish that value, but we could say you need to have $100 worth of liquidity between honey and your token so that we can do these sort of swaps in order for you to appear on the interface. And because the token would have an established price, they can figure out what that amount of tokens they need to provide into that pool would be to reach that $100 in honey liquidity or something. And then we've got like a pretty straightforward way that we can establish that link that benefits the community, that like makes the UI kind of work without having to force them to like use a bonding curve, this like really deep integration with their token. We don't have to force them to use honey as their kind of collateral token. And over time, if they've like minted tokens or whatever, they can kind of diverge and do their own thing. So it's not like they're hooked in forever. But that's sort of the rationale right now, how we would get kind of a similar sort of effect without using the bonding curve. And I think maybe that's part of the reason that like we were like, oh, we can accomplish kind of what we were planning on accomplishing with the bonding curve, but do it in a simpler way that like required kind of less engineering work and sort of less buy-in from people. That's not to say that the bonding curve isn't valuable, because I know on the TEC side, one of the goals is to create a stable pool of resources to fund a commons, and this like initial level of liquidity. So I think in that specific use case, and like the goals there, around like the common stack design, it makes a lot more sense to be like, oh, we're trying to get this initialization thing to build up this pool of stable value resources. That's like a slightly different goal than the goal of like, we want to do the lowest friction, easiest thing that we can do to enable people to leverage conviction voting with their tokens, right?
So what you're saying, Luke, is like we can find some way to combine the bonding curve and this liquidity pool for the when you start with the token.
I don't think I would say that we would combine it, but I think that for the reason that we had kind of originally talked about using the bonding curve with Honey as the collateral token, I think we can create similar like baseline levels of like liquidity that we can kind of trade for. We can connect Honey into the ecosystem without requiring them to use Honey as their reserve currency, without having them even needing a bonding curve at all, because they can use their own token for the reserve token and the voting token in the same way that we do for Honey, or they can stake a token and use whatever token they want. But the thinking that I'm like kind of landing on is, I feel like the work that the Garden Storm has done with the TEC to launch the TEC is sort of productionizing the Commons template or the Gardens template, this like flavor, that I think is sort of like a reference implementation for sort of the Commons stack. And I would like really love to see that continue, and see like a platform for like Commons and the Commons stack for people to like replicate that process. But I think that the user flows and like the goals and even the interface for that ends up being slightly different, even though it's still using conviction voting. It ends up being like a different product that is like targeted at a slightly different set of users. And that's sort of why I'm like pushing back against the like trying really heavily to converge them, because I think what we sort of like, our product iteration and like our goals, because they're slightly different, have led us to be like, okay, we don't really want to integrate a bonding curve here because we think it adds a lot of complexity and it creates a lot of work on the front end to allow for like various different flavors of this kind of concept. Whereas like we might want to draw a slightly smaller circle around that concept, to simplify things. And then I think in the same way, it probably is easier if you're productionizing the Commons template to be like, this is the one workflow. Everybody goes through a hatch. Everybody has this phase, and that's like built into the thing, as opposed to like a platform where you're like, some people go through it this way, some people go through it this way, right? It's still flavors of a concept, because we're doing DAOs and we're doing conviction voting, and I think there's a lot of like room for cross pollination and even collaboration on like conviction voting features. But like thinking of it as like a end to end product that like a user would come to, I think it's a different set of users. I think it's a different pathway. And just like I'm like super excited for Colony launching, because people that want to launch a colony should launch a colony. I don't want everybody to like use the thing that we're building if it's not the right thing for them, right? So if we end up in a situation where we sort of have this kind of divergence, I think we can still like work together and support both of these things, but they can just be two distinct kind of platforms or solutions. I don't know what the vision is on the Common Stack TEC side for like replicating thing. I know it's like an iterative design cycle, so I don't know if it'll be a platform anytime soon, or it'll be like we launch the next Commons and it's iterated on these tools a bit. But I think that there's that distinction where like maybe it's a separate code base that you're iterating on because you've implemented all of this like hatch kind of stuff. And maybe you pull in some of the stuff that we've done with conviction voting into the next iteration or something like that. But yeah, that's kind of high level how I see the distinction.
Okay, so just to like summarize, it's like, yeah, originally the solution for making this all work with honey was that honey could be a collateral token for a bonding curve. But guess what? The whole ecosystem evolved, and we found other solutions for liquidity, specifically like the two-sided market of an AMM with a liquidity provider, which is a lot easier to bootstrap, and you created a bunch of cool ways for Honey to be part of that with Celeste, HoneySwap, probably other future infrastructure, as well as like potentially a liquidity requirement where people are required to basically burn honey, which would make it very directly beneficial for the Honey token. And then it's also something that's a little bit more easier for people to understand. It exists already. And now, again, like the big issue is having people start at a place and then having them make an extra decision between, do I have a bonding curve or not? And that potentially could cause some issues. And then I think both you and Will, both Luke and Will, you guys both asked about like what is the TEC common stack, currently named Garden Swarm, like platform ideas, and what is our vision and what is our path. And maybe I can jump into that really quick since we only got 20 minutes left now. Jeez, that moves fast. Okay, so as far as the TEC, so the TEC is really, it hurts me a little when I hear you guys say TEC, because the TEC is our first user. I feel like the Garden Swarm is really more of a common stack thing, because the Garden Swarm is, the TEC is not trying to do anything repeatable, but the common stack is using the TEC as a first user of the product of the Commons template, right? And the common stack, it's critical that we learn as much as we can from our first user to make it repeatable. And very much so, we are thinking once the TEC is done, we already have like we're doing a lot of extra work from the common stack side from what the TEC really needs to do. Like if the TEC was just trying to be the TEC, we wouldn't be trying to like democratize how do you choose these parameters. You know, Zargum, me, Trent, and probably Luke and Sam, we might bring Will into, we just have like a 3-hour hack session and we would choose the parameters and it would be done. You know, like we wouldn't do all this extra documentation. We would just launch the TEC. But it really is a common stack led project, and the goal is the TEC we want the token engineering commons, obviously. Like this is a very critical piece of community that needs to be really supported and loved and needs access to tools, because so many people are doing token engineering in their own silos, not sharing it with the world, and it's just slowing down. We could speed up the evolution of like safe digital infrastructure that can be repeatable and like have design validated before it's launched for users to use. If we can get all these awesome token engineers to be hanging out in the same community and feel supported and make that whole community regenerative at the same time. And this is why it's so awesome to have the One Hive Gardens like as already here, and it's just like, well, let's make it work. From the common stack perspective, though, we're really looking at microeconomies. We want small groups, could be even like just 20 people who want to help clean up the river outside of their little village. That even for them, it doesn't make sense to have a liquidity provider, and like it's still a two-sided market, and even Uniswap, you need to have people providing liquidity, and it doesn't make as much sense as a bonding curve. So for our use case, we're really focused on making lots of micro economies that can benefit a lot from having the infinite liquidity that a bonding curve provides. So that's and also we want them to have this like easy ability for them to design their own system. It's not going to be easy at first, of course. It's very complicated, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible, maybe starting with more open source projects and these sorts of communities that are still smaller, but will, can get a little technical and design their own economy. So the vision for us is once the TEC has been launched, we have a case study going already. And what's really important to us is that it's way more than tech. There's a lot of community building and cultural building and like cultural best practices that can be teamed up with the tech. So we're putting a lot of effort into this, like, what are the most important principles on the cultural side for achieving a successful community, and pairing that documentation with the technical documentation so we can give people a handbook and say, here, anyone can start their own microeconomy. It doesn't have to be something that scales to thousands of people. You can just make the value that you want to create for your nonprofit actually regenerative, because now you have a token that can quantify the qualitative value that you're producing. So that's kind of the vision of the TEC and the Common Stack operation. Once the TEC has been done, we have Atta. He's a PhD student that also works for PrimeDAO. He's been doing a case study for a while so that we can learn all of the things that we succeeded on that were like easy wins, and also like what went wrong in the TEC that slowed us down in ways that really were unnecessary. And really taking this as a research opportunity so that we can take this case study and like the handbook, the cultural handbook that the TEC makes, and then combine that into a cultural handbook that everyone can use to then take, along with technical documentation, to actually design their own commons template, their own commons, right? And we want to go right away. Once we have the gardens, once we have the commons template with the TEC working, maybe a month or two of feedback to improve like challenges that we have, and then here you go, world. Let's get your tokens on XDAI right now. Build it here, and we would like to have, at least from the Common Stack perspective, 20, 30 commons before we start doing the next iteration. Because just because it worked really well for the TEC, or it worked really well for maybe 3 or 4 groups, or it didn't work really well for 3 or 4 groups, that's not enough. That's a small sample size. We'd like to see at least 20 or 30 generating data, so that we can now take that data and actually build a little bit more robust, do a lot more robust work on the CAD models and the like understanding what were the sticky parts with all of these people. I mean, Luke, I've been in here, I've been trying to do the same thing since the Aragon DAC, right? So we're pretty stoked about it, and we're not going to stop. The big fears that I have, or the challenges that I have with the garden swarm turning into different pieces and moving parts, is that we'll have to duplicate or triplicate work. I really want to make sure that what we're doing with the Commons template is it doesn't turn into Autark and Aragon, for instance. Where Autark's like, please merge our pull requests, and then Aragon's like, yeah, we'll get to it in a month. I want to make sure that, like, okay, we want this thing in conviction voting. You guys want this thing. Like, with our roadmap right now, we have been focused on the hatch, because with working with the legal side of things, we found that it was easier to launch in 2 parts. So it's like, oh, okay, well, so let's focus on the hatch part, which has no value to the One Hive template, right? The honey template. But that was just our roadmap. And then, because the honey price went down, we ran out of money, and we couldn't really we're just now getting to the part where we can start really I mean, we did a little bit of work on conviction voting. Like we made a front end, just proof of concept style. But now is the time where we really need to coordinate with you guys so we can get what we want out of conviction voting. And for us, it's really important to integrate the user testing that we have with the TEC. So I have like a fear or a challenge that if we break up into different pieces that aren't communicating really well, all this user testing that we have that we feel is really important to be integrated into conviction voting improvements, we're going to have a lot of conflicts around getting them merged, and eventually we might be pushed to fork it, and we don't want to fork it. You know, like we want to make sure that this is a well-oiled, lovey-dovey machine that like we can make compromises where they need to be made, or improvements, or however it can be coordinated on the dev side. And then the second fear is, well, now we just did all this work. We got Chewy. Chewy's a beast, man. Like we have an opportunity to do a lot of marketing and get these ideas communicated. But at the same time, like the scope is the scope. If our scope of work is the Commons template, and we need to like, you know, you want that to be separated from the OneHive template, then we would need to like build a whole like communications process around like, hey, this is the Commons template, and it feels sort of like duplicating work again, you know, like where it's like, okay, but this is Gardens, and yeah, you have to choose this path, but maybe, you know, we could share the communications labor and try to educate the users about how great conviction voting is, and here's your flavors, you know, it's like, huh, chocolate or vanilla, maybe Napoleon, you know, bring your own flavoring. That doesn't really work, but but yeah, I don't know. That's my thoughts. What do you guys think?
I definitely don't think that basically, from my perspective, my qualm is with trying to convey coherently to users what the platforms are. And I think by naming them the same, it will be hard for them to understand the differences. And as we both discussed our visions today, like there are clearly quite significant differences in the target audience and also the functionality that is going to be involved. So I don't believe that. I don't see any reason why we can't continue to work together at all. Like we can definitely continue to have meetings and share all of the code that we're writing. And the fact is if we do something that you find useful, you'll want to use it. And if you do something we find useful, we're going to want to use it. And like there's definitely there's no reason why any work should be any time should be wasted duplicating work. I definitely don't think that will happen. I think the communication is still going to remain, and maybe we'll all try and be a bit more communicative. But it's just the narrative surrounding them. I suppose it's just the portrayal of these ideas to the user base that I'm concerned would be confusing if they were labeled the same thing. And then coming on to your second point, what was your second point? Forgot it now.
The development coordination.
Yeah, I wanted to interject there.
Yeah, go on.
With regard to the like forking and autark and stuff like that. I think that like the model that we're going with, especially as we sort of like, if we were to treat these as two separate kind of things, is really like prevents that type of issue, right? Because I think if we think of like the smart contracts as sort of like a kernel implementation, you can have different flavors of like Linux that use different like flavors of the kernel, and like you're rebasing and using different code, but you have complete freedom within your like distribution to do whatever you want. I think one of the challenges that was happening with like autark and Aragon 1 was you have this like client software that everybody has to use, and somebody has to maintain, and so you have this like maintainer being like, do I want to like maintain this code in my like thing when like this new feature gets added, because I expect there's lots of long-term support required to do this, or if it's like architected differently. Like there's room to kind of collaborate, but like if we treat this as sort of like, let's collaborate on things that we want to collaborate on, but like let's make sure that everybody has the freedom to iterate and do what they want, because we're not trying to create like a monolithic like single source of truth for the like front end that everybody has to like fit in and be standards compliant with or something like that. That's one of the reasons like that whole like modular approach feels so scary to me, is because you're like, okay, we've got to have backwards compatibility with all of these things. We've got to have like standards compliance. We have to like do all of these things that are going to create those conflicts if people are trying to like be agile and iterate and like respond to user feedback and all those things, because you're going to have different sets of users with different user feedback. I think that like what we can do to make sure that we are like aligned and collaborating is like find the overlap, work closely together. I think we're all like aligned philosophically, but then try not to put up roadblocks in terms of like trying to reach consensus on like what is in what repo. If we want to like break out, like we already have conviction voting as an app in like a separate repo, and maybe we both use that as upstream, and we like we're going to hit roadblocks in terms of getting into upstream, and we can have people on both sides as like maintainers there. But like we might end up diverging upstream before things get merged, because we don't want to like wait until we've reached complete consensus to fix like a feature or make an improvement on the like downstream repo, right? So I don't know how that fits in, but like I very much agree with your like concern with regard to the like the development process in these situations. Like I don't want to replicate what we saw with like Aragon and Autark, and I think a large part of that issue was this sort of like balance of power in the like repos and stuff like that. And I think for our perspective, we don't want to try and like centralize that, which I think was like, and I don't just mean centralization in terms of team, but like logical centralization in terms of the code base. And that may end up creating redundant work. Like I'm not gonna lie, if you like centralization is highly efficient in some ways, right? In terms of like those things, but you get all of those trade-offs in terms of like all the baggage that comes with that. If we take a more like open source decentralized approach where you have like forks and branches, everybody that's working on the fork or the branch has complete control over their domain. But there might be redundant effort in terms of like bringing code over or like rebasing it and stuff. And I'd take the redundant effort as like a trade-off over the like kind of really slow and sort of grinding political processes to make changes to like a really broadly shared code base that everybody needs. And like there definitely will be things that I think like, I don't know, the Aragon OS code base will end up having to maintain if we're both building on top of it, and Aragon abandons it, right? And that's like this deep thing that like we don't want to touch hardly ever. But if like but if that's like a shared thing, we'll have to like figure out whether there's sort of upgrades there. I don't know. I don't know how that will play out, but I expect that like there's no desire on our side, and I don't even mean to say our side, because we're all in this together, right? Like it's not like I guess, and this is a challenge with the Aragon culture. It's not like this is our domain. This is like a common good that we're all sort of contributing to and sharing. And like the nice thing is, it's not going anywhere. It's open source code. Like,
so do you guys imagine? Okay, so let's say that we split off into the common swarm. Would you imagine you would start a garden swarm and have like, you know, a comms person and have like your own development structure?
I don't think we have immediate plans to create like a garden swarm or another swarm for this. It's hard to say because like all these things are sort of emergent. We have the Celeste swarm that's kind of been working on the integration for the like one hive thing, so that's kind of that already sort of exists, and likely would be kind of doing that work. And I don't think we really need to like recreate it, maybe shuffling names around. But I would see gardens more as sort of this is a project, and it's on there. We might have the group in Discord, but we don't need to create a whole nother swarm. Hopefully, we're working with like the Buzz swarm for like marketing and communication stuff. I'm also really eager. Colony is launching. I'm eager to experiment with using Colony for some of these like domain tasks, so you can have like the marketing domain and the dev domain. Maybe we'll try something like that. But I think from like the perspective of the like swarms, they're like working groups. So we might have like a project that's focused on building out the like DAO factory pieces once we've launched the Celeste like upgrade. And maybe that'll have a lot of overlap with the existing Celeste swarm. Maybe we'll like pull people from the common swarm because they're knowledgeable on all this stuff, and just kind of create like the project working group for this thing, and probably use the Gardens channel for that. Maybe we'll need like a multi-sig or a DAO or a colony or something to like manage funds. But I think that like we probably don't want to create a pattern where we're like every swarm has a marketing guy and an entire team, because I think that's pretty redundant. Hopefully we can just grab people to do tasks that are their specialty, and they kind of come and go and float between different swarms. And I think ideally that's like kind of like holocratic circles or whatever, where people play multiple roles and they participate in multiple different things. And hopefully we don't create way too much overhead doing that. That's like the risk. But yeah, I mean, I think that these swarms don't need to be really like impermeable boundaries. Like I really miss working with David, and I haven't gotten to work with him because he's been so busy in a while. But like, it really should be something where we're floating kind of between different things and pitching in where like we can add the most leverage at the time, and then going off and doing other things.
So I guess this is the other thing that is in the back of my head is, you know, I'm wearing my Giveth shirt, right? So like, I really want Giveth to have a more of a honey template, probably a BYOT, because we want to launch like within a month or two, probably 2 months, and have a token before that, and then start working. And Gabby's already starting on that, like that process. And then, so like for me, I'm like torn. It's like, oh wait, but I want to create both flavors of gardens, you know. So, like
you can be in the working group on that. Like you're more than welcome. Yeah, of course. So like, and I think we really want to prioritize that and want to work with Giveth. We've got like a couple other people that have like had expressed interest in the like bring your own token thing. Like I know the like Whaler DAO guys, I haven't been following that project. They wanted to do it with Tree. Our hackathon project that I'm working with Gabby and Felix on, will have like a token that we love to be able to like issue on mainnet for various reasons, because we're going to support lots of networks. But we want to be able to have like a DAO on XDAI and use conviction voting. So just park the token there would be great. Like I think that definitely has legs, which is why I was like, not everybody's going to want to issue their own token. I think it's great. Like it'll be super easy to replicate that. But the bring your own token thing, I think is where like where we're going to see a lot of like traction initially, because so many people are going to just have a token for their project. And they're like, oh, conviction voting, I can have that, and they're going to be like, oh, how do I integrate that thing? We're like, you don't need to. Just bring your token over, send some revenue or like donations into the pot, and you can start going.
Yeah, I really like the value add of a liquidity mining scheme, not just liquidity providing, but like, oh yeah, here, do this, and then automated liquidity mining for your token. That would be, I think that'd be a huge selling point for almost anyone who would be like, oh, I get conviction voting and liquidity mining on a second chain. No brainer. You know, like, yeah, here's 100 honey, whatever. Like, let's just get this done. That would be magical. But yeah, well, I mean, I guess we can see how it evolves, and you know, we'll talk with Sam and the crew, and we'll see. Is there any other blockers on the political, social level? Because I know that there's complete support and love, but like, you know, we do really want to actually start asking for funding from One Hive. Is there any other political or social blockers there that we should be concerned about?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I mean, you've got my support. I think that, like, if we're kind of aligned on kind of the proposal coming from like a common swarm or like rebranding thing to focus on the commons thing, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think that precludes us down the line from saying like, oh, the same group of people, now that project is done, is working on this other thing, and maybe we don't call it a commons, we call it something else. But like, there's no restrictions on any of that. I think it's just a matter of like figuring out the clarity with regard to these like two things that just because of the history that has nothing, it's not your fault at all. That there's this history of using this term for anything that's causing confusion. So like, I don't want anybody in the swarm to feel like this is a political divide or like territory issue over this term, because I think it's like both situations totally have reasonable grounds to use that term. And as a community, we just have to decide which one is using it and which one isn't. And like, the other solution that I had proposed was we just figure out a different name for this other project, and we could keep using gardens for the way that we've been using it. But yeah, in any case, I don't think there's any real like blockers.
And I guess I want to hear from Sam and Paulo about what you guys think about forking the conviction voting, and then trying to merge upstream to the One Hive repo and having this divide. I mean, does that feel good? Does that? I'm not the one who has to touch it, so.
For me, what I think is, I think that we can separate the terms of garden and commons, and I think that it has a lot of sense. I think that in order to work on that, it may have sense or not to divide the swarm. I mean, the current garden swarm could be renamed to common swarm. It will be not a problem. But at the same time, the idea is that we are going to be working on gardens at some point, because as you were saying, there will be, the people is going to be moving around the different projects. We can say that we have two projects, commons and gardens. Gardens is the official One Hive communities project, and commons may have more support from the commons stack. This is something that I would like to ask you if that is something that you consider temporary or not. Like, common swarm will be or the commons template will be a project from One Hive in the same level or in as any other swarm, or you consider that as an external project that can be supported once in a while, but you consider it something that is outside? Because as from the beginning, we're considering that inside One Hive, we did not do the correct communication, but we were thinking that that was one Hive, and that's the only thing that I am not understanding completely, because we have been forking the repos into TEC. Probably this is not going to be the final place to be. We can move that to Commons Stack. We can do pull request to One Hive. Just to understand a little bit, how do you see the Commons template inside One Hive?
So I guess the Commons template. What do you mean by in one hive? I mean, are you implying
like in the one hive GitHub organization? Because
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of clarity, and I don't know if anybody does on like exactly where the boundaries of one hive actually are. And I think it's like a very dynamic thing. And I think that's both good and bad, right? Like, but in terms of the boundaries of the GitHub organization, that's much clearer, right? The repos are there or not, and they could be forked, and the forked versions could get ahead and be rebased back. I don't think a super concrete decision needs to be made there, but I would say that like if the Commons template is being used as sort of the like current like reference implementation that Common Stack is heavily working on, doing that in the Common Stack org is like there's no like there's no like marketing territory thing of like this should be done in this org. To me, if it gets done in the org, it gets pollen, so that's like an advantage for you guys. If you guys want to work on it in the org, it can be attached to pollen, which I think is nice, a nice little bonus, and you got like cred and stuff. But if you guys want to be like, the Commons template is in the Common Stack org because it's the thing that you guys have been working on for so many years, and it just happens to like have started out in this other GitHub organization in the same way that like the CAD conviction voting thing started out in the block size repo and is now in the one hive org repo.
There's definitely a legal
benefit. Like whatever you guys would like. It's not like a
there's some, you know, the Common Stack Swiss Association is specifically designed to protect development, so like there's a lot of benefit before the TEC was launched to make sure that that's in the Common Stack repo and the development's happening there, just because like, oh look, you know, the Swiss Association is doing this. You know, as you said, there is some legal thought that needs to be put in, unfortunately, because of the fundraising aspect of the bonding curve. But obviously, we're all huge. We're all honey holders, you know. We're all part. You know, I'm not nearly as part of One Hive as you guys are, but like I bought my way in. Okay, I'm in. I want to be. I'm a believer, you know. So I definitely want. I want to feel like I'm contributing to One Hive, and I think Sem has that same feel. We just want to feel like we are supporting the cause, you know, and this dream. So, however, the pollen isn't nearly as important as it is just like the recognition we're still part of One Hive, right? You know.
I definitely do.
For me, the GitHub organization is not a source of truth for what's in One Hive at all. It's literally infrastructure that we have to maintain because it needs to exist. But if we have like we've had people spin up different Discord servers. There's like an international One Hive Discord server. If somebody wants to create like a swarm, like a separate GitHub organization run by a different swarm, it can still be One Hive. Like One Hive is not the GitHub organization at all. We've got like the honey token, we've got the like the community covenant, and for me, and I think this is even in the wiki, it's like the thing that is One Hive, because we can all like, even if you don't hold honey, you can be part of One Hive, right? Like you don't have to buy your way in, you just have to care. And like it's if you're getting like funding from the protocol, that's a really strong signal that you're part of One Hive, like regardless of where the development work is happening. So like that's where I kind of draw the line. Everybody can be part of One Hive, and like unless you're submitting proposals that are getting disputed because they violate the community covenant, that's kind of when you're not part of One Hive.
Okay, I know that we're way over, but I really want to hear what Paulo has to say about the development strategy of basically, yeah, we will work in our conviction voting repo, and then we try to both, and then so the Celeste team might work in their conviction voting repo, and then we try to merge upstream. If that feels good to you, Paulo.
Yeah. Taking into account what Luke was saying, if one Hive is not the GitHub repos and the code that exists there, then it shouldn't be a problem forking some components, working on them, merging them afterward. And regarding the renaming, as I said on the previous meeting, I had no problem changing the name because of the reasons that you guys were talking about regarding the confusion that might appear on the on users about the same name for two different like products or ways of creating DAOs. And I really like the idea of having like as Luke was saying, having multiple swarms or like micro communities. I don't know how to call them, and people going one community to another to if they could some areas of expertise and if they can help, then they could go to one community or another and help with some specific issues there. So there is no like sense of silos or I mean, I like the idea that you can move freely between one community to another to help without having too much restrictions. So that's why I don't think that the renaming will be really that big of a deal or a problem if we maintain that philosophy of helping one another on a general level.
Great. And Shui, you're the other stakeholder who hasn't had a much chance to talk. Do you have anything that you want to ask or any other thoughts?
Not really. It's been very interesting to listen to you guys' points of view, and I agree. I get what I guess that in the end, the only thing that that might be like awkward, you know, it's like this whole thing is like, okay, so what's gonna happen uh with the commons template? How is the commons part of like one hive? Like we all want to be a part of it. Like that's a reason we are all here. So yeah, I mean, I guess like even making this decision right now, you know, to like go different aim. Uh, as long as like we talk about like more openly about our fears with this decision or insecurities, I think it's gonna strike in a lot, especially if in about less as we're talking like triples and the ideas that we believe in heaven. So yeah, I mean, thank you all for being here for contributing, and yeah, let's see what happens the next weeks. Talk to some of guys separately during the week. I can get a better hold of practical decisions about like what everyone is gonna make on, and yeah, anything that you guys need regarding like comms and everything, let me know. Don't be uh like like if you make like a decision or something that you think is gonna impact, or that I think it's worth for everyone else knowing, please feel free to send me a message or like Telegram or whatever, and yeah, I'll keep finding the best way to put this information, these news out there, and so that the community can be more informed and eventually back our proposal.
We didn't hear you very well, but more or less it was understood. And I guess that we can keep going with the in the chats and in the forum, and to have this conversation, how to be coordinating around conviction voting and the different projects that we have in hands, and also to communicate them. So thank you so much for you all for coming. I guess that we can.
Yeah, it's so good to be aligned, and now we can just get back to building communities and economies, huh? Thanks, guys. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Cool.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.